How are you all doing? Great. We're almost at the end of the semester. Isn't that exciting? All right. Maybe not because finals are coming up, but you're almost there. All right, everyone. Hi, my name is Suzanne Nasser. I'm a full-time faculty member at the college. You can find me and some of my counseling colleagues who are in the house here, if you can raise your hand. Alex, advisors, Sundus, and Mesa. Any of my other counseling colleagues here? Well, you can find us in the second floor of the Student Service Building, the Counseling and Career Development Center. So if you need any support, personal counseling, career counseling, or academic counseling, that's where you can find us. I know lately I've been engaging in a lot of conversations and exchanges with our Arab and mostly Palestinian students about how the genocide in Gaza is affecting you all personally, and how it's affecting your ability to stay on task academically. So please don't hesitate to reach out to us. On behalf of the Arab Heritage Month Committee and my colleagues who serve on the Celebrating Diversity Task Force, I'd like to welcome you all to today's Arab Heritage Month talk, Palestinian Freedom Beyond a Narrow Focus on the Recent Upheaval. Today's talk is being presented by Muhammad Sankari. Muhammad is one of the lead organizers with US Palestinian Community Network, I think since 2010. Yep, he's been with USPCN is the acronym. So Muhammad has been with them since 2010. And USPCN is a national Arab and Palestinian grassroots organizations with chapters in 8 states, plus DC, and at-large members in many other states across the US. Since October 7th, US Palestinian Community Network, in coalition with other Chicago-based organizations, has led mass protests every weekend, demanding an end to the US-funded genocide against the Palestinian people in Gaza. USPCN, with support from the Chicago Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression and the Coalition for Justice in Palestine, also worked tirelessly to pass a ceasefire resolution in the Chicago City Council, making Chicago the largest city in the US to call for an end to Israel's military onslaught against the Palestinian people in Gaza. That's a huge, huge win. To date, USPCN is working closely with and is in support of Students for Justice in Palestine, other student activists, organizers, and organizations, including Students for a Democratic Society, and faculty and staff all across the country as they build encampments on a number of campuses to denounce their respective institutions' complicity in the US-funded Israeli genocide against our Palestinian people. And they are demanding immediate divestment from any and all collaboration with the racist and Zionist state of Israel. If you are Arab or Palestinian and want to learn more about how you can get plugged into the work and want to organize in your community here for Palestinian self-determination, for the right of return, and for the end of Israeli colonization and occupation of all Arab lands, please feel free to connect with Muhammad after his talk, or you can contact USPCN online at uspcn.org, and please feel free to follow them on social media. They're on Insta, Facebook, and Twitter. And now I'd like to bring Muhammad up to the mic.
Thanks, Suzanne. I feel like Suzanne took about 20% of what I wanted to say there. So thank you. Thanks, Suzanne. Thanks to Moraine Valley for inviting me on behalf of USPCN. And thanks to you all who are attending today. I know that I was just asking folks, you know, how close are we to the end of the term? And you know, I had like senioritis from my freshman year in college, so I know that it's like hard to do anything, especially when you're close to the end of the term, especially for those of you who are graduating and going on. And so, you know, truly, I appreciate you all coming, engaging with me in this conversation and presentation, hopefully conversation. So Suzanne talked a little bit about the US Palestinian Community Network. Can I just ask real quick, has anyone, can you just like raise your hand quickly if you've ever heard of USPCN or the US Palestinian Community Network? A couple folks? All right, great, we're doing our job. There's more than one hand. So Suzanne had talked about we're a national US-based Palestinian and Arab organization that works on organizing around Palestinian liberation. Suzanne talked about the demands of USPCN, which are not our own. They don't exist in a vacuum, right? These are the demands of the Palestinian people for almost 75 years now. USPCN has engaged in a number of different things, a number of different activities in a number of different arenas of work, maybe is the best way to say it. And we're going to talk about this next, that the world history didn't start on October 8th, 2023. Forgot what year we were in. History didn't start on October 8th, the day after October 7th, right? And so our work in USPCN, and as I'm sure you all know, didn't start only in the last 7 months. So outside of that, what our work has looked like in USPCN has been promoting cultural events and cultural presentations from cultural performers from Palestine who come and visit the United States. And so we have a partnership with, how many of you all are familiar with DEPCA? Yeah? We have a partnership? Okay, great. A few more hands than are familiar with USPCN. We have a partnership with the DEPCA troupe called the Wishah troupe in the West Bank that we've toured nationally across the United States. We engage in the BDS movement, boycott, divestment, and sanctions. Folks know what that is? Yeah? Nod their head a little bit? Okay, great. We have numerous BDS campaigns that we've engaged with, including currently the, oh my God, I just blanked on the name. I wanted to say Sadaf. I wanted to say a different word. The Sadaf campaign, Stop Sadaf. Has anyone ever noticed, has anyone ever noticed the brand Sadaf? They have like these different teas, different coffees, things like that. It's kind of like Arabesque in their marketing and things. Okay, well, think of the name Sadaf when you go to the Arabi grocery store, because some of our Arabi grocery stores carry Sadaf products, not knowing who's behind the company, not knowing the politics of the company, not knowing their investments. So we're currently calling and working on a boycott Sadaf campaign. Sadaf is based in California, and so our California chapter is most active with that. And then, of course, in moments like the moment that we find ourselves in, which, yes, truly is an unprecedented moment, but in other moments before this time, organizing our community in direct action, organizing our community in protests and rallies, in making our voice heard in the United States. And I'll make an argument in a little bit as to why that role is so important, especially in this time. So maybe enough about USPCN, at least for now, in terms of who we are. What I wanted to do was, if you all will kind of join me, and I want to share with you kind of how I wanted to lay out today. I want to just talk a little bit about history, situate us in history, right? Reminding us always that, again, time did not start on October 7th in 2023. A little bit of history around Palestine. From there, I want to talk about what the current genocide that the Palestinian people of Gaza are facing. Sorry. I want to talk a little bit about what the genocide that the Palestinian people in Gaza are facing looks like. Excuse me. I want to talk about what USPCN's work has looked like in the last 7 months. I want to touch on what's going on in universities and why universities are so important, and what the struggle in universities looks like right now. And I want to leave us on kind of pose an open-ended question to you all, because you all are very intelligent college students capable of critical thinking, and I want us to kind of collectively think together. What is our responsibility as college students, as community members, as people with family back home? What is our responsibility in this moment as administrators of a university that's home to the largest Palestinian diaspora community in the United States? I have some suggestions that I'll throw out to folks, but more importantly, I think that we can kind of collectively think of these things together. And then I want us to, throughout, feel free, I'll say throughout this process, if you want to ask a question, if you want to engage in some kind of conversation, by all means, please do, and maybe I'll pause at different times to ask folks. And then at the end, of course, I want to leave time for us, as much time as possible, to have, there's a clock right here, as much of a discussion as we can, right? You all spend a lot of time getting talked at by people who are smarter than you some ways, maybe not so much in other ways. I'm not one of those people. I really came to engage with you all as much as possible, get us to pose some questions and to think collectively about what this current moment means for us and what our responsibility is. So I'm going to do my best not to talk at people. So I got a timer here. I just want to situate us, talk a little bit about our work, and then maybe we can engage in some principled conversation with one another. Sound good? All right, cool. Thank you all. Okay, so I'm going to ask folks a couple of questions here. When I say the Nakba, who knows what that means? Folks just like raise their hand. I say the Nakba. When I say the Naksa, who knows what that means? A few people as well. Okay. Can I ask folks to just like raise their hand and keep it up if they or their family are from anywhere in the Arab world? Yeah? Okay. Can I ask folks to raise and keep their hand up if they or their family are from Palestine originally? All right. Can I ask folks to raise their hand and maybe keep it up if they or their family are from the West Bank? If they or their family are from 1948, one of the villages that was destroyed during the Nakba? Or if they or their family are from Gaza or living in Gaza now? Thank you. I ask us to do that because I really want to ground us in remembering that I'm not just speaking about some like far off place. This isn't Agrabah in a Disney movie, right? This is somewhere that we're all from. This is somewhere that many people here have personal connections to. This is somewhere that many people here are deeply, deeply involved in the unfolding genocide, whether themselves or their family or their community members or their neighbors or their loved ones. It's very real. So I want to take us back, right, if I can. And I'm going to do my best to go over history as brief and as concise as possible. So I asked folks what the Nakba was. So the Nakba in Arabic is the catastrophe. And that's what Palestinians call the ethnic cleansing of Palestine and the establishment of Israel on historic Palestine, on 78% of historic Palestine. And just for like argument's sake and to make things concise, we kind of mark 1948 as the Nakba. And I have compiled by someone who is better than me a very nice infographic here that I want to share from, I believe, Middle East Eye. Yep, okay. So when we talk about the Nakba, this is, as I said, time didn't just start in 2023. If we want to mark the beginning of the Palestinian movement or the Palestinian struggle, technically it's before this, but this is the principal moment, right? The establishment of the State of Israel on 78% of historic Palestine. And it was the result of the forced displacement of 750,000 people, the depopulation of historic Palestine, over 530 villages destroyed, roughly 13,000 people killed, and many massacres were committed in the lead up to this, right? And this is over a period of time. But again, for all intents and purposes, we Palestinians and Arabs, talk about 1948, the year of 1948, because that's the establishment of Israel. So there's a couple of important things. One, this is not to say that this is, and I'm going to also harp on this. My point here is not to say that the Palestinian situation or the Nakba is a unique occurrence in history, because I'd be lying to you. In fact, we live in a country in which a very similar history took place in the establishment of this country, right? Israel is not the only settler colony on earth. But it is important when we're talking about the Palestinian people and the Palestinian people's right to self-determination and liberation and return, that we situate ourselves in this, in the creation of Israel at the expense of the Palestinian people. So this is 1948. After this, Israel is created, as we said, 750,000 people to 800,000 people. Obviously, numbers are, it depends who you ask, right? Are forcibly displaced. Those who are living inside of Israel that are Palestinian under the declared state live under military rule at this point. It is if you are a Palestinian who did not leave at that point, you live at this point in time in 1948 under military rule, right? In which all of your movement and all of your livelihood is under the rule of the newly established Israeli military authority. And more importantly, and most importantly, Israel from this moment declares that it is illegal under Israeli law for any Palestinian who left to return to their original home and land, right? So Israel, enshrined in its law, says that Palestinians, the refugee population that were removed from their homes and lands, are not allowed to return to their home and land solely for the fact that they are Palestinian. This is contrary to international law. It's contrary to UN resolutions. We could talk, I'm not a legal scholar, we could talk about that forever. And again, it's not unique only to the Palestinians. My argument is not the Palestinians are the only people, the only refugees who have a right to return to their original homes and lands. No. But what I'm saying is the Palestinians also have a right to return to their original homes and lands. So this is 1948. It's the establishment of the State of Israel, the ethnic cleansing of Palestine. I want to zoom ahead a little bit to 1967. Oh, wrong tab. 1967. So this is, that first one was from Middle East Eye, which is a news source you all can look up. This is from an organization you can see on the bottom called Visualizing Palestine. If you're like me and a visual learner, they have some really great infographics, right? So this is a little bit of like a abridged version history, but if we look at 1967, so we see 1948, 1949, right? There on the left, all that blue is what we're talking about, 78% of historic Palestine. Then we see in 1967 what's called the Six-Day War. In Arabic is called the Naksa, or the setback, right? There's an expansion of the Israeli occupation into the Sinai, into the Golan Heights, into Jerusalem and the West Bank. It's an additional, I believe, 100,000 people who are displaced at this point in time of the Palestinians, some of them who had survived the displacement in 1948, right? And so Israel then in 1967 de facto controls all of historic Palestine, right? And for all intents and purposes, that reality has not changed at all. I'm gonna just like, now what has changed, as you can see here, is there was, Israel withdrew from the Sinai at some point after another war and then a settlement. Israel occupies southern Lebanon and then withdraws in 2000. But when we focus, just laser focus in on Palestine here, if we just look at this last map, functionally, Israel still controls all of historic Palestine. And I'll explain why functionally is different than on paper, maybe in just a second. So in 1993, there was something signed called the Oslo Accords. Has anyone ever heard of the Oslo Accords in the context of Palestine? All right, cool. A few more hands, right? So in a very short manner of speaking, the Oslo Accords were meant to end the Arab-Israeli problem, right? To give a state to the Palestinian people on the West Bank and Gaza Strip, with East Jerusalem to be their capital. The right of return was supposed to be, the return of refugees was supposed to be negotiated at a different point in time. The West Bank was supposed to be under de facto Palestinian Authority control along with the Gaza Strip. And then there would be different, they like laid out a framework and said, we'll figure out the details later. Spoiler alert, the details were not figured out later. And not only that, Oslo, I'm very comfortable in saying that Oslo was a complete failure from its inception and has failed completely now. There's nothing left of the Oslo Agreement. Since Oslo, we've seen the expansion of hundreds of settlements across the West Bank. There are hundreds of thousands of settlers that live in what would be the Palestinian-controlled state. Israel maintains, again, de facto military control over all of the West Bank and all of the ports of entry in and out of Palestine. So there is no, it's not worth even discussing the Oslo Accords. It's not worth discussing the Palestinian Authority control. It doesn't exist. It exists somewhere on paper on something that no party to the world abides by. So I just want to then take us to Gaza here. I got until 12:15. All right, you're going to take us to Gaza, and then I'm going to move quick. So in Gaza, which is this kind of tiny, do folks know where Gaza is? Okay, if we look all the way on the left there, you see that little white strip right there on the bottom left? That's the Gaza Strip, right? One of the most densely populated places on Earth. There are inhabitants originally from Gaza, and people who were forcibly displaced in 1948 went and settled in Gaza as well, right? So it's a refugee population, but there are also people who originally are from Gaza. So it's both. The Israelis have maintained a de facto complete siege on Gaza since approximately 2007. What that means is that there are no ports of entry that are controlled by the Palestinians. Air, land, water, all of it is controlled by the Israelis or their allies in the Egyptian government working alongside them. What this has meant is that Israel has completely controlled all factors of life in Gaza, to the point in which the Israeli government themselves had admitted in like 2009 or 2010 that they had, upon imposing the siege on Gaza in the mid-2000s, they had calculated the total calorie intake that people of Gaza would need to not starve to death, where they could maintain a population that was hungry in hopes that they would uprise against, or cause problems for the ruling authority in the Gaza Strip, which at that point was Hamas, without starving them to death and causing themselves, a political PR disaster. So every facet of life functionally was controlled by the Israeli siege. Every few years, the Israelis did what they called, again, this is the Israeli military establishment's words, not my words, mowing the lawn. And mowing the lawn meant that every few years they would launch an attack on Gaza, they would kill a few thousand people, they would try to send a message, and life would then kind of, go back to status quo after that. What this has meant is, for example, Operation Cast Lead in 2012, in which 1,500 Palestinians were killed in less than 30 days. We talk about other attacks in which hundreds of Palestinian children and youth and men and women had been killed through these different attacks as well, right? And all of this takes us from 2007 until present day. So, I think we all know that the world has been focused on Gaza since October 7th, obviously. And I just want to highlight a few things. We could just talk about statistics. We could just sit and talk about statistics forever, which I don't want to do. But I do want to, here we go. Can folks read this? Is that better? That's good, okay. It's like hard because, there we go. So this is from, sorry, again, just so that like you know that I didn't, one, I have terrible Photoshop skills, and two, so you know that I didn't just like make this up at home before I came. It's from the Euromed Human Rights Monitor, right? It's an international recognized NGO, non-governmental organization. So this data is outdated, by the way. This is from day 140, if you all can see at the top left. We're now in over 200 days, right? So we can see here, there's a whole bunch of different things, right? We can talk about all the different statistics. How many heritage sites were killed? How many people have been displaced? How many journalists have been targeted? How many, whatever, right? Take your choice, right? Take your pick. But I want to show this to just demonstrate the totality of destruction in the Gaza Strip, right? In this ongoing genocide. So, it's now surpassed 40,000 people killed, many of them obviously being women and children. The Gaza Strip is approximately, I think it's like 55% of the Gaza Strip are minors. And so it's one of the most densely populated places on Earth, one of the largest populations of minors in the Gaza Strip, and this is what, the full-on assault of one of the strongest, arguably the third or fourth strongest military in the world, is where it's taking place, right? At this point in time, I just want to talk about a few things that I think highlight the severity. Again, we can talk about numbers forever. But at this point in time, there has been a new designation that is created in the hospitals of Gaza called an acronym, WCNSF. Wounded Child, No Surviving Family. The reality is that there is a new category that is being created in the international community in dealing with health and trauma with children specifically, that there are so many children who have been killed, so many children whose families have been killed, excuse me. Promised I wouldn't get emotional, I'm sorry, y'all. So many children whose families have been killed and they have been left as sole survivors. And this is not unintentional, this is by design, and I want to talk about how we know. Has anyone ever heard of the publication 972 magazine? Yeah, it's like a kind of progressive-y publication that comes out of Israel, actually. And I think his name is Yoav Abraham, just broke a story. He's an Israeli journalist who broke a story of something called Project Lavender. And this is important because actually what we are witnessing in Gaza is the creation of new warfare. This is a demonstration of what kind of warfare we are going to be seeing in the future. This is very important. What we are witnessing in Gaza, Project Lavender is an AI project in which the Israeli government creates kill lists based on an AI algorithm of different markers. All right? So this is by what's the word I'm looking for here? Not only by design, but this is from Israeli intelligence officers themselves who did this interview with 972 magazine. It's a very, very powerful piece. It's 8,000 words, which is a lot of words. You can also look up his interview. If you just Google Project Lavender on Democracy Now!, there's a very concise interview with the author. So these kill lists are created through this AI-fed machine in which they create different markers. I believe there's 100 different markers to detect Hamas or Islamic Jihad militants and mark them for death, okay? So the Israelis, using Project Lavender, have created a kill list of 37,000 people targeted for assassination, okay? Now, that's one piece of it. The other piece, and some of this sounds asinine, I know, but I promise you, again, look it up, fact check me, I'm not making this up. They use another program in tandem with Project Lavender called Where's Daddy? Not joking, that's the name of it. And what that does is it tracks the 37,000 markers on this kill list, specifically tracks their movement and alerts the Israeli military when they enter their residential building, when they enter their home. Because the Israeli military specifically used this program to target people in their home as a way to ensure that they were killed. This was used, we know of, at least in the first 6 weeks to 8 weeks of the attack on Gaza. And at this point in time, we've seen, at that point in time, if you all look back, there was an exponential amount of death that was happening. Like these numbers, yes, it's been 60 days since then, but these numbers have kind of, it sounds gross, it sounds almost sick to say tapered off. There's only 2,000 more or only 3,000 more that have been killed. But we were talking about a very rapid exponential growth of death in the first 6-7 weeks of this war. And you can go back and check it. And it was due to this program. So people would be marked for death. They would be pinged. They would be pinged when the Israeli military would be pinged when they entered their home. And then they would green light an assassination attempt, right, on this person. So the Israelis themselves say that on average they spent less than 10 seconds clearing the artificial intelligence kill list data, right? And by the Israeli army's own acknowledgement, the data, at least 10% of the data was nonsensical. At least 10% of the kill list, there was no way, by their own markers, that this person should have been a target, right? So again, this is like, if the military themselves, who is unveiling this program, is themselves saying that 10% of the people on this kill list by our own AI markers should not have been on a kill list, was a computer-generated error, it tells you, we're not even getting into who gets targeted and why, right? Which mostly is males of a specific age. If you fit that criteria, males of a specific age and your relation to other people or your interactions with other people, right? 40% of the assassinations that were carried out were considered low-level combatants, which means just people who did not have, allegedly were combatants, allegedly had no rank in any of these, in Hamas or Islamic Jihad or any of the other militant organizations, right? And they were carried out, these 40% of them were carried out by dumb bombs, right? So not precision-guided weapons, not the very, high-level, whatever, James Bond stuff that we see on TV, laser-guided, whatever. This is just a big explosive dropped on a residential building. And the Israelis themselves say 40% of these were killed, 40% of these assassinations were carried out this way because the target was not high value enough to justify the cost of using precision-guided weapons. Again, not my own language. Read the 972 magazine report on Project Lavender, okay? So the question then that we must ask is, if these targets are not high precision enough, why then is it justifiable to bomb an entire residential building to kill this one target? And this is, if we just take the first step of accepting the Israeli framework that all of these people are militants and all of these people should be killed, right? If we don't even want to challenge that, if we want to accept their framework, then the next question becomes why, right? The US military similarly has rolled out AI targeting in their bombing campaign in Yemen now. And this is, what we've seen before is in different attacks in Gaza, Israel will develop specific kind of technology that will then be sold worldwide to different militaries. And Gaza is kind of a training ground of military procedure, military technology. And so, I'm not trying to be like a tinfoil hat conspiracy theorist here, but truly we're seeing this. This is the cutting edge of what war is going to look like in the future. Is that algorithms and AI are going to generate lists for assassination or generate targets for militaries that are then, maybe going to have human oversight, right? And maybe going to be reviewed, or maybe not, as we see, again, by the Israelis' own admission in what's happening in Gaza right now. The last piece that I'll share about this, because I think it's important, is in international law, again, I'm not a legal scholar, international law, there's something called proportionality, right? And so in the rules of warfare, if let's say that there is a military that goes and kills, attacks a country, right, and kills a certain amount of people, right? In the rules of warfare, there has to be something they call proportionality. This is a very dumbed down way of saying it, right? Which means that if one soldier is killed, you can't go and nuke an entire continent of people, right? On a very basic level. And because in international law, you want to establish, even in wartime, you want to establish norms and rules, right? The Israelis, again, by their own admission, using Project Lavender and Where is Daddy, in the first at least 6 to 7 weeks of the war, had, in their words, for the first time, used an algorithm of proportionality that was 3 digits to 1. Okay, so what does this mean? What this means, and I'm sorry that I'm getting into the super nitty-gritty here, but I just feel like it explains so much of what we're seeing. What it means is that if a person was a valued target by the Israelis, the proportional acceptance of known civilian casualties would be three digits to that person. So there was the assassination of, I believe his name was Yusuf Naufal, who was a Hamas commander, in his home, and there were 300 civilians that were killed in that bombing. It was in a refugee camp, right? So they flattened an entire residential district to kill him. So what that means is that the Israelis used a proportional algorithm that says killing 300 plus civilians for one high-value target is an acceptable proportional calculation for us in carrying out this program, right? And so again, this is why we saw such a rapid explosion of death at the beginning of these 6-7 weeks of what's ongoing. And again, by the Israelis' own admission then, that they are willing to kill hundreds and hundreds of civilians per one AI-identified Hamas or Islamic Jihad militant. Okay. We know that the genocide is ongoing in Gaza. We know that tens of thousands of people have been killed directly, and we know that hundreds of thousands of people are still at risk of death from things like malnutrition, starvation, disease, lack of clean water, lack of food, etc. Right? The very last thing I want to say, because I heard this from a Chicago-based doctor who had served in Gaza, that was so stark to me, is that humans in general, like the World Health Organization, marks that you need about 100 liters of clean water a day to like drink and bathe and wash your hands and whatever, right? That right now in Gaza, people have access to less than 1 liter of clean water a day. So less than 1/100th of what's needed, that the World Health Organization considers the baseline for survival, right? And so think about just like for me, why it was so important is think about every time that you use water. Just forget about drinking water. You just use water, right? Like you wash your hands, you bathe, you wash your dishes, whatever it is. Think about not having water and how rapidly you would get sick, or you would be, some other thing could happen to you because you don't have access to clean water. So not only are the people of Gaza facing the severity of being bombed and killed in this genocide, but the reality is that we unfortunately have not seen the full death toll yet, because disease and starvation and lack of access to water and things are what's going to come next. Okay. I want to talk now about what we've done about it. So US Palestinian Community Network, we're a member of the Coalition for Justice in Palestine, and that is it's representative of all the major Palestinian organizations in the Chicagoland area. And as Suzanne had mentioned, from the onset of the genocide, we had announced weekly demonstrations that we've held. So we've held 7 months almost now of demonstrations that has brought cumulatively hundreds of thousands of people into the street, including about 25,000 people about the 3rd or 4th week of October in Chicago, which was probably, at least in my time in USPCN, the largest Palestinian demonstration that I had been a part of. We took part in the struggle to pass the ceasefire resolution, as Suzanne spoke about earlier as well, in Chicago. So Chicago City Council, as Suzanne had mentioned, Chicago is the largest city in the United States to have passed the ceasefire resolution. It was put forward by a Puerto Rican alderwoman, Rosanna Rodriguez. It was fought for by a coalition of progressive Black, Latinx, and white alder people like Byron Sigcho Lopez, Daniel Laspada, and it was a very, very, very tough fought battle. I think we got to give credit to Rosanna and Byron and Daniel and others first and foremost, but there was an entire movement of people, a multiracial movement of people that was fighting for this ceasefire resolution. So one thing that I want to mention is USPCN worked in a coalition that we called the Black-Brown Coalition for Palestine. Because we said, just frankly, our community as Palestinians alone, Palestinians and Arabs alone, are not going to be able to move legislation in Chicago City Council. We don't have that kind of power. It's good to have self-confidence. It's even better to be self-aware, right? But what we do is we have a lot of very deep relationships with other oppressed communities in Chicago because of years and years and years of being committed to joint liberation, right? And so this Black-Brown Coalition for Palestine did a roll call, identified who are the alder people in Black neighborhoods and Latinx neighborhoods in Chicago that are still on the fence, that are movable, that are not all the way to the right on this question, and let's move them. And there were thousands of phone calls made. There was tons of meetings that were done behind closed doors from every angle, from constituents, from business owners, from academics, from everyday people, just like myself, I was none of the above, to move these people. And at the end, the ceasefire resolution, if those who remember, the final vote that was cast was 23-23, and Mayor Brandon Johnson kept his promise to our community and broke the tie in favor of the ceasefire resolution, right? And so that, again, didn't come in a vacuum, and it didn't come, I'm even going to say as far as it didn't come because politicians are moral people. It's not a question of morality. It's a question of, can we make it understandable to them that, one, it's going to affect what they care about, which is their election or their seat or their kind of little enclave, if they're an alderperson, or two, that we can make another kind of argument to them, right? Financial incentive or other. We don't have a ton of financial incentives, but what we do have is people power, right? And so that's the importance of this work. I would argue that yes, it's a moral question. Yes, it's an ethical question, but when we're approaching people in places of political power, we really need to analyze it from a power perspective. Do we have enough power to move this person? Some people you can move morally, some people you can move ethically, and that's fantastic. And sometimes we have to say, let's be strategic, right? And so there were, I want to use the city council fight to just highlight, there were people that voted for the ceasefire resolution that I vehemently disagree with a lot of their policies that they would promote otherwise. But on this question, we were able to push and say, this isn't like a quid pro quo. I'm not going to go volunteer and pass out literature for this person. I'm not going to turn out people to vote for this person. But what we're going to do is we're going to flex the power of our organizing to say, can we force this person to be right on this question, right? And so that's how we approach, from a strategic angle, that's how we approach the political work that we engage with in things like city council or things like Congress people. So to talk about Congress people a little bit. USPCN has led now for 7 months direct confrontation with all of the Congress people that purport to represent our communities in Illinois, whether it's Bill Foster, Jan Schakowsky, Sean Casten, or other Congress people, Senator Dick Durbin, Senators Tammy Duckworth. We've gone to their events, we've gone to their offices, we've staged sit-ins, we've interrupted them, we've forced them to engage in a conversation that they do not want to engage with, right? And what I will say is, I named a lot of people, and you probably will say, there's a broad political spectrum between a Bill Foster and a Dick Durbin, or a Jan Schakowsky and a Bill Foster, and you're correct. There is a broad political spectrum. Congresswoman Jan Schakowsky is legitimately progressive on many, many important issues. She's legitimately progressive on immigration. She's legitimately progressive on access to health care and a woman's right to choose, and so many other issues that we all care about. And she's legitimately wrong when it comes to the people of Palestine. And so what we've said to her and others that tout their progressive politics is that you don't get to be a progressive and then not be progressive on genocide. If you want to be known as a progressive, then you have to take a progressive stance against genocide, right? And so that means no longer funding unconditional aid to Israel. It means questioning how our tax dollars are being spent. And it means standing up for your constituents who are saying, we have family, we have friends, we have loved ones who are facing genocide right now, right? And I will say, there is people who disagree with this perspective. with USPCNs, but again, we approach it from a strategic perspective, right? Which maybe someone like, to their credit, maybe there are some people in Congress that you can appeal to their kind of moral sense or moral compass, right? But it's not enough. And so what we need to do is pressure them and force them into positions that, or conversations that they don't want to have. And I'll share one example from Dick Durbin. Many people have heard that Senator Dick Durbin was the first senator to come out and say that he believes there needs to be a ceasefire, right? Which is correct. He did say that. And then when Senator Bernie Sanders put forward a bill essentially that would force a review of the weapons sales to Israel and condition it on not furthering human rights violations. He wanted to pass that as a separate bill. Dick Durbin said he supported the sentiment, and when it came to pass it as a standalone bill outside of another financial bill, he voted against it, right? And so, yeah, he says that he believes in ceasefire. Great. He says that he believes that we should be reviewing weapons sales for human rights violations. Fantastic. What are you doing about it? That's the question that we always want to ask politicians. What are you actually doing, right? It's great to me that you say the right things. It's very nice that you acknowledge our humanity, you know, but you're not my neighbor that I'm going to invite over for dinner. You're an elected representative. You have political power. In Dick Durbin's case, you're one of the most senior senators in Congress. And so language is not enough. Nice words are not enough. What we demand from these people and what we should continue to demand from these people is action. And this brings me to the last two things I want to talk about. So USPCN has also engaged in a number of shutdowns. We shut down Lakeshore Drive. We shut down the 9094 for a period of time. We shut down I believe it's I-90, the one that leads to O'Hare. And I think legitimately there's a lot of confusion or maybe feelings of, well, this isn't strategic. You're going to lose people. This doesn't help your cause. We've heard this from different arguments that have been made, right? So I just wanted to talk about that briefly. So first and foremost, what I want to say is that at this point in time, we know that the popular will, the popular position in this country is one that is ending the genocide and permanent ceasefire. I believe it's like in the latest polling, 65+% of the country says that that's what they believe in, right? And so our demand when we do these actions is that business and life as normal, as usual, business as usual as we call it, cannot continue in a genocide in which our government has a role in ending it, right? If the United States stopped supplying arms to Israel at 11:57 a.m. Central Time today, the genocide would end immediately. If the United States made it clear that they will not resupply, rearm, and politically support Israel, the genocide would end tomorrow. And so our responsibility here in the United States is unique in that we need to continue to raise the demand, we need to continue to raise the stakes of our direct actions and of our protests to make sure that the question of genocide is on everyone's mind, is on the news every single day, and everyone has to grapple with it, right? And that's not to say that we're trying to punish anyone, right? What that is to say, though, is that we are challenging people to say that, what about my life? That challenging people to take a moment and say, how can I go about my normal life when my government is responsible for facilitating and arming genocide right now? And I just want to share that this is a strategy and a line that we learned specifically from the movement for Black Lives in this country, right? Shut down highways, shut down streets, to say that how can we allow life to continue as normal when Black people are being killed at a disproportionate, at a horrendous rate by police and other armed militants in this country, right? And I want to talk now, which brings us now to university encampments. I think folks have seen an explosion in the last few weeks. Columbia has taken kind of center stage in the news. Cali has probably done one of the more or most militant until last night protests. They had actually already beat anyone else. They had occupied university buildings, demanding that the university divest. Columbia University, as of last night, has now occupied a building as well. Hill Hall, I think. And as of, what are we at, 12 o'clock? As of 2 hours ago, DePaul University has launched an encampment. And so University of Chicago has an ongoing encampment, and DePaul University has an ongoing encampment in Chicago. What I will say is that universities have always been a key place of struggle in the United States. Universities and colleges have always been a key site of progressive struggle, whether it's the struggle for ethnic studies, or it's the struggle against apartheid in South Africa. And so these students are carrying forward a very proud tradition of university and college students who say that we have a unique role as university and college students in society to ensure that our government and our universities take a stance against injustice. And so, like I said, I think the best example is Columbia University. There was an encampment, the last encampment that I know of at Columbia University was against apartheid in South Africa. And at the time, the administration said all the same things they say about the encampment right now, that the Palestinian students, or the encampment for Palestine that's happening. And now, fast forward, now that apartheid has fallen, now that the United States has joined on the right side of history, albeit a little bit late, Columbia University celebrates that encampment as part of their proud history, right? And so university students and college students like yourselves, I think, have a very unique position in our society to push forward, to pull the rest of us, even if it's kicking and screaming, into the right side of history. One of my favorite quotes is from a philosopher, Frantz Fanon, who was from Martinique, and he was actually a psychologist who joined the Algerian liberation movement. But he said, every generation out of relative obscurity must identify its role and fulfill it or betray it. And that's what college students around the world, really around the world, are doing right now. They are raising to the call. They are assessing what is our role in society right now, what is our role in ending a genocide, and are we going to rise to the occasion to fulfill it? Are we going to fight to try to fulfill it, or will we decide to betray it? That is no judgment for me to pass. I'm not a university student. I don't have my body on the line. When I say betrayal, maybe it's a little bit of a heavy word. But what we've seen is that students from all sectors, from all nationalities, from all races and all religions are rising to the occasion and saying no more on their campuses. And this is the last point that I want to make, which is, what can we all do? So I just have a couple of questions really to pose, which is to the administrators that have joined us. Thank you all so much. I got to meet some folks from different departments and things, so thank you all. I want to ask you all, what do you think your role is in this moment in supporting your students? What is our role as administrators at one of the most important educational institutions in this state for our community, for the Palestinian American community, and for the Arab community, Arab American and Arab immigrant community as a whole? What is our role in supporting these students as they are watching arguably history's first live broadcast genocide? What is the role of administrators, and what is the responsibility to the students, to people who have friends and family who, in the case of one Palestinian family from Gaza in Chicago, has lost over 100 family members in this genocide? What is our role as administrators of an educational institution that serves them in this moment? I don't have an answer. I'm legitimately asking. Another question that I would pose is, what are the risks that you as administrators are willing to take that make sure students are able to be their whole selves in this time? Because you can't compartmentalize genocide, is the reality. You can, in a moment in which I can look on my phone right now and spend, in 20 seconds, I can tell you all of the attacks that just took place, how many people were killed, what families they were from, what areas the strikes happened. In a moment in which this is all happening, What risks are administrators willing to take in support of their students? And I want to just uplift, I think, a great example, which is the University of Indiana at their encampment. An administrator from the graduate student program or graduate studies program, I'm not so good with the labels. She showed up and spoke at the encampment. And she said, older white woman, she came and she said, I can't stay silent anymore with I have to speak up in support of what you all are doing. I can't stay silent with what the administration says to you. And she said, I will lose my job tomorrow. I know this. But what you all are doing is right. And my responsibility is at least not to be silent when you all are doing this. To the students, young people, maybe I get to be young still, I'm somewhere in the middle. I think the question for us, I call myself a yelder, a young elder. The question to us is, what is our responsibility to our people right now? What or how can we use our positions as students in universities and centers of learning to enact change? What demands do you have of the school or of the administrators in a time of genocide for yourselves, for Gaza, for all of our communities? These are questions I don't have an answer to, but they are questions that I wanted to pose to you all, and I would actually, just for selfish reasons, would love to hear your thoughts on them. And maybe for non-selfish reasons, hopefully spur a conversation. I know we're 2 weeks away from graduation and from finals, and from some of us who graduate go on. Some will do their finals and come back next year. But all of you and all of us, like I said, and this is not because I'm standing in the building, Moraine Valley Community College is one of the most important educational institutions for our community, our being the Arab and Arab American community. So what is our responsibility to each other, to our people? What is the administrator's responsibility to ourselves in this moment, in our unique position? And I'll end it there. Thank you all so much. I appreciate it, and would love to hear if folks have questions or comments. I think Suzanne has a mic if folks want to be mic'd up and ask anything. I'll also hang out afterwards if you feel more comfortable talking one-on-one or three-on-one or whatever it is, instead of pitching in front of everyone. So if you could just say your name for my own kind of sake.
Hi, assalamu alaikum. My name is Fatima.
Alaikum salam.
So, two things. One comment is that I know that Moraine Valley is one of the most populated for Arab community. I remember my dad going back home, and she's coming back, she's telling me every person that sits next to her is a student that's coming to Moraine Valley.
That's right.
And it's what always makes me smile about this school. But my question is that recently JCC has a arrest warrant against the political power. What would happen with all of the AI and everything? What would happen if it all stopped? That's my first question. My second question is, how did they get all the AI supplies? Like, who supplied the AI? Because I know Elon Musk was like part of it first. How were the supplies enhanced with an AI?
So the first part I think was just so important, was talking about, you talk about your tete, your grandmother, on the flight. First, like beaming with pride, talking about Moraine Valley, and then talking to you on the flight back from back home, saying everybody sitting next to her on the plane were all students at Moraine Valley Community College, right? So it exemplifies what we're talking about of Moraine Valley being such an important institution. Second thing I think you said is the ICC warrants potentially against Netanyahu, the arrest warrants against Netanyahu and others. Yeah. And then the second piece of that was, where does this AI technology come from? So the first point about the warrants for arrest against Netanyahu and other political leaders, nothing has been announced yet. We don't know if it's coming or not coming. But what we do know is in 2002, and this is important, in the United States, we actually passed a law under President Bush that said if there was ever anyone, any personnel from the US government or military or allied governments or military that was taken in front of the criminal court in The Hague, the United States would use all means, including military invasion, to free them from that prosecution. And so it's very clear that the United States has no interest in upholding the warrants if they come for genocide against the Israeli military and political leaders. And then to your second question about AI, that's actually one of the things that this reporter is looking into now, which is, so Israel has, to their credit, has a huge tech sector, a huge developed tech industry. And so much of it could be domestically produced. But there are questions of, are there US firms that are also then working hand in hand with Israel, such as Google, in developing this AI that's then being used to commit war crimes? And then should those companies be held responsible for that? So those are also questions being asked without answers right now, at least. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Ragad. My question is for you is what is the next step for us as students? I get what you're saying about the poll in Colombia, but in this point, we did join the, what is it called? Oh my God. Like when we went to downtown and we helped them and everything. But what's the next step for us right now?
So one thing I would offer is, I wish I had the answer and I don't, the short answer of like, just do these 3 things. I think we're all figuring it out together. I think one thing I can offer is join an organization that's involved in all of the work, like USPCN. If you want to join USPCN, ahlan sahlan, we would love to have you. But join an organization that provides you infrastructure and colleagues and resources to be able to take more definitive and stronger action, right? We're only as strong as our numbers, because until we get some billionaires and some politicians in our pocket, what we have is people power, right? So I think that's the first thing. I think specifically you asked about being a student, and it's been a few years since I've been removed from a campus. So I was legitimately posing the question. I'm not sure. You all, as students, have specific conditions and realities to yourself as students. I think some students around the country have been answering it in different ways. I think you all are uniquely positioned to make an assessment of what would make our campus community better, what would make our campus community stronger, and what is our role in doing that, specifically in this case in ending genocide in Palestine. I think we can start by asking ourselves those questions, and I think you and your brilliant colleagues probably will come up with much better answers than I could if I sat down and tried to guess.
I think this will be our last question.
Assalamu alaikum, Muhammad. My name is Mariam. My question is, I've been asked multiple times to give information to people who don't really know the history of Palestine or don't know how to catch up on the history and what's going on right now. Are there any people on social media that you would recommend for people to follow that breaks it? I mean, I don't want to say break it down because there's so much, but kind of give them the basics, and so that way they can actually understand how we got to the point that we are right now.
Oh man, that's a good question. Okay, so I'm like telling on myself here, but I really suck at social media. I don't have Twitter, I don't have Instagram. The last thing that I used was Facebook. So truly telling on myself. So I know that there are great people. I don't know necessarily who they are, but what I would offer is I think that some of the resources like Visualizing Palestine is a great place to start. I think there are some other really good like informative institutions like the Electronic Intifada and Ali Abu Ni'ma, who's a Chicago native. I see his book was up there somewhere. It caught my eye. His one country, there we go, from Ali is there. I think that there have been some people from Palestine and from Gaza, like there's a young man named Mu'taz, who I believe is a photographer. Folks maybe are nodding. That kind of grew, kind of raised to fame, documenting what's happening in Gaza. I think there's a young woman named Bisan as well, yeah? And then Muhammad al-Kurd, who is a young man who grew up in Jerusalem, who's kind of like rose to prominence. I think he was a Columbia University student, actually, yeah. And I think that they are great resources. I also think that one thing that I'll say is people should not be afraid of not knowing enough to be able to get involved. All right? Like, we don't have to, no one on the street is going to be like, what year did it, you know, like, that's not going to happen. And you don't have to be able to answer those questions, right? I think that on a very basic level, if what's happening in Gaza shakes you to your core because you're a human, then that's enough for you to go out and engage. And I think that that's the moment that we're in now. We have such a broad movement that's happening now, not because everyone's read, not because everyone knows all the details, not because they like came to a great talk at Moraine Valley, which hopefully today was, but because on a very basic level, there's an innate feeling inside of you of this is wrong and I want to raise my voice against it. And then we can find so many people, students, community members, others who are institutions like USPCN who are raising their voice that you can add your voice to be a part of the movement to end the genocide.
I want to, I know some of you have class perhaps that you need to get to, so we don't want to hold you any longer. If we can please thank Muhammad for this fantastic, we had an ambitious agenda, I think in terms of points that Muhammad wanted to cover, and I think he exceeded that ambitious agenda and gave us so much information, new information, perhaps a reflection or a review of things we already knew. And so thank you so much. I also want to add, in addition to following USPCN, get plugged in. Ragad asked, what more can we do as students? Get plugged in with the Arab Student Union here, with the Muslim Student Association. I think Sandus Mahdi is somewhere here in the room. Keep an eye on the calendar. We still have 1 or 2 more events for Arab Heritage Month. For more information, we have a selection of books over here that you can check out. Thank you to the library for hosting us, Troy, Dan, Tish, for all your support in helping us get this space together. And feel free to come up and talk to Muhammad if you have any more questions. I think he can stick around for at least a few more minutes. Thank you, everyone. And thank you, Maha and Amani, for bringing your classes.